In the stillness of the early morning, before the sun has fully risen, a medieval scribe begins his quiet ritual. The world outside his small stone chamber is still, the air crisp and cool. The first light of dawn gently seeps through the narrow window, casting soft shadows on the walls. Inside, the scribe stirs, rising from the bed that has been carefully made with simple woolen blankets. The bed is small, as was common for the time, designed to offer comfort rather than luxury. The room is modest, with the stone walls keeping the chill at bay as best they can. The scribe moves quietly, his steps light on the stone floor. He pulls his woolen tunic over his head, feeling the warmth of the fabric against his skin. The tunic, though worn, is well made, crafted from the finest cloth that his wages can afford. In this small, simple room, everything has its place, and the morning ritual is as familiar to him as the air he breathes. The scribe moves to a small wooden table by the window. It is here, at this table, that much of his work will take place. The table is covered with scraps of parchment, ink pots, and quills. Some of the parchment has already been used, the delicate, uneven edges a testament to the many hours spent creating it. He examines the ink pots, carefully adjusting the level of ink, ensuring there is enough for the day's work. The ink itself is a deep, rich black, made from a combination of soot and water, mixed together until the consistency is just right. It is a labor-intensive process, but one that brings satisfaction. The scribe picks up the quill, its feather soft and delicate in his hand. He dips it into the ink pot, watching the ink cling to the nib. The sound of the quill's tip brushing against the parchment is soft, like a whisper. As he begins to write, each stroke is deliberate and measured. The characters flow across the page with grace, the ink settling into the parchment in a way that feels almost like an extension of himself. This is the beginning of his day, the start of a routine that will stretch through the hours, each moment dedicated to the art of writing. The words he writes are not his own, but those of others, ancient texts, religious prayers, and scholarly works that have been handed down through the generations. The scribe's job is not to create new ideas, but to preserve the wisdom of the past, ensuring that it is passed along to future generations. The text he writes is often in Latin, a language that, though difficult, he has mastered over the years. The letters are formed carefully, each one a tiny work of art, shaped with precision and care. The room is quiet except for the faint scratching of the quill on the parchment. Occasionally, the wind outside stirs the trees, the rustling of the leaves barely audible through the thick stone walls. The scent of ink fills the air, mingling with the faint smell of wood and candle wax. The only other sound is the soft flicker of the candle beside him, its flame steady and calm. As the morning progresses, the light outside grows brighter, and the scribe continues his work. His hand moves steadily across the page, each letter following the one before it in a rhythmic dance. The hours slip by unnoticed, as they often do for those who work in silence. The scribe does not hurry, for there is no need to rush. The work is its own reward, and each completed page brings a sense of peace and fulfillment. At times, the scribe pauses, his eyes scanning the words he has written. He runs his fingers over the parchment, feeling its rough texture. He examines the ink, ensuring it has dried properly, its dark sheen a contrast to the pale, smooth surface of the paper. There is a satisfaction in these small details, in the knowledge that the work is done with care. He does not look for praise or recognition. The act of creation itself is enough. The morning passes quietly, the steady rhythm of the scribe's work marking the passage of time. The sun has now risen fully, casting a warm glow through the window, and the day begins to take shape outside. Yet, within the small chamber, it remains peaceful, undisturbed. The scribe works, his focus unwavering, his movements slow and deliberate. As midday approaches, the scribe's work begins to slow. His hand grows tired, and he places the quill down for a moment. He stands and stretches, feeling the stiffness in his joints. The room is still, and the air has warmed slightly, though the stone walls retain the coolness of the early morning. The scribe moves to the small hearth in the corner of the room, where a fire burns softly. He tends to the fire, adding a few more pieces of wood to keep it alight. The crackling of the fire is a soothing sound, filling the space with warmth and a sense of security. He moves to a small cupboard, opening the wooden door with a soft creak. Inside, there are simple provisions: loaves of bread, cheese, and small jars of dried herbs. The scribe selects a small piece of bread and breaks it into pieces, placing it in a bowl. He adds a handful of herbs, the earthy aroma filling the air. It is a simple meal, one that sustains him through the long hours of work. He eats quietly, the sounds of his chewing soft and gentle. Once his meal is finished, the scribe returns to his table. The day has now fully arrived, and the room is bathed in the golden light of the afternoon sun. He picks up the quill once more, dipping it carefully into the ink. As his hand moves across the parchment, he is aware of the passage of time. The work is endless, but it is also timeless. Each letter, each page, is a small part of something greater. He is a link in a chain that stretches back through history, connecting the past to the future. The day moves on, the rhythm of the scribe's work steady and unbroken. As the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the room, he feels a sense of quiet satisfaction. The pages he has written today are nearly complete, their contents preserved in ink and parchment. The day has been spent in the quiet rituals of his trade, and there is peace in knowing that his work will continue long after he has gone. And so, as the light begins to fade and the evening draws near, the scribe prepares for the next part of his ritual. He carefully puts away his tools, cleaning the quill and wiping the ink from his fingers. The room grows quieter still, the only sounds now the soft crackling of the fire and the distant rustling of the trees outside. He moves to the window, gazing out at the evening sky. The world outside is calm, the stars beginning to twinkle faintly in the darkening sky. The evening has arrived, and with it comes a sense of completion. The scribe reflects on the day's work, knowing that tomorrow will bring another quiet morning, another day of ink and parchment. But for now, he can rest, content in the knowledge that he has done his work with care and dedication. The fire burns low, the room grows cooler, and the world outside falls into stillness. The scribe settles into his chair, the flickering shadows playing gently on the walls. His work is done for the day, and the quiet rhythm of the evening has begun. And as the night settles in, the scribe drifts into a peaceful sleep, knowing that tomorrow he will rise again to continue his quiet rituals, preserving the written word for generations to come. The morning light gradually settled across the scriptorium, filtering through the small, leaded glass windows and casting soft, muted patterns across the wooden tables. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of parchment and the subtle warmth of the hearth that had been tended since before dawn. In these quiet hours, the scribe began the careful preparation of materials for the day's work. Parchment, typically made from calfskin, goat, or sheepskin, had been stretched, scraped, and dried in advance. Its surface, smooth yet slightly textured, invited the gentle caress of quill against it. The scribe would take a sheet in hand, holding it up to the light, observing the subtle variations in color and thickness. A faint yellowed hue often indicated older parchment, while newly prepared sheets glimmered with a soft, cream-like sheen. It was common that certain sections were reserved for illuminations or marginal notes, and the scribe would mentally plan the placement of each line and ornamentation, considering the space and flow across the surface. The quills, usually made from goose feathers, had been carefully selected for length and curvature. In preparation, they were trimmed with a small, precise knife, shaped to produce a sharp, yet flexible nib. This allowed ink to flow smoothly without blotting. The scribe would test the nib by dipping it lightly into the prepared ink, allowing the first strokes to fall on a scrap of parchment. The ink itself was a mixture of iron salts and tannic acids, often combined with a binding agent such as gum arabic. It carried a dark, earthy scent and a slightly metallic taste when accidentally touched to the tongue, though this was rare. Small pots of ink, some black, others in subtle shades of brown or red, were arranged carefully across the table, each with its own little lid to prevent evaporation. The scribe would lift a lid slowly, inhaling the quiet aroma, appreciating the smooth consistency before dipping the quill gently, letting gravity draw a tiny bead of ink to the tip. Once materials were arranged, the scribe often began the day with a ritual cleansing of hands and tools. A small bowl of water, warmed slightly by the hearth, was used to rinse the quill, followed by careful drying on a soft cloth. Fingers were wiped with the same care, ensuring that the natural oils of the skin would not mar the parchment. This attention to preparation was a quiet meditation, a moment of deliberate calm before the day's labor. In this way, the scribe entered a rhythm of gentle motion and mindfulness, the mind slowly attuning to the steady, repetitive patterns of writing. The act of writing itself unfolded at a pace dictated by patience and precision. Each letter was formed with deliberate attention, the hand moving smoothly across the page. Gothic scripts, with their narrow vertical strokes and elaborate flourishes, required careful measurement of height and spacing. The scribe would often use a finely ruled lead line, faint and unobtrusive, to maintain even lines and margins. Occasionally, a small compass was used to create circular forms for illuminated letters or decorative elements. The quill glided over the parchment, leaving a thin, glistening trail of ink that would darken as it dried. The scratching of the nib was soft and consistent, a sound that blended with the occasional crackle of the hearth and the distant cooing of pigeons outside the scriptorium windows. These were the background notes of a world measured by careful action and quiet reflection. Time passed slowly in this manner. Morning light shifted across the room, lengthening and tilting as the sun rose higher. The scribe might pause occasionally, leaning back to rest the hand, eyes moving over the growing lines of text. In these moments, one could observe the subtle details of the workspace, the gentle wavering of candle flames in small sconces, the slight draught from a window left ajar, the muted scent of beeswax polish applied to the table the day before. A small bell might ring from the nearby chapel, marking the passage of the hour, yet within the scriptorium, a gentle serenity remained. These pauses allowed both the mind and the body to rest, a necessary part of the day's rhythm. Mid-morning often brought a small interlude for refreshments. The scribe would step quietly into the adjoining kitchen or cell, where simple food was prepared. Bread, dense and wholesome, sometimes accompanied by soft cheese or a small serving of fruit, offered sustenance without distraction. Ale or thin, lightly brewed beer was common, often preferred to water, which could carry impurities. These moments were not rushed, the act of eating slow and deliberate, each bite chewed thoughtfully, allowing the body to absorb the nourishment while the mind lingered on the tactile sensations, the crisp crust of bread, the smoothness of cheese, the subtle sweetness of a ripe pear. Such rituals contributed to a sense of continuity, the day flowing steadily without abrupt change. Upon returning to the scriptorium, the scribe resumed work with renewed focus. The midday light, warmer and richer than in the early hours, illuminated the textures of parchment and ink. Marginalia might be added at this time, small symbols, notes, or reminders to indicate references or corrections. These were written with a lighter hand, almost as if whispering across the page, so as not to disturb the main text. In some manuscripts, miniature sketches of plants, birds, or decorative flourishes would appear, drawn with fine brushes and delicate pigments. These pigments, often made from minerals or plants, required careful mixing with water or binding agents to achieve the desired consistency and hue. Ultramarine blue, derived from lapis lazuli, was particularly valued, its deep, luminous tone used sparingly due to the high cost. Small pots of these pigments were handled with care, and the scribe often cleaned the brushes meticulously after each application, wiping excess color and rinsing them gently in clean water. Afternoon brought a continuation of this slow, methodical rhythm. The scribe's eyes, accustomed to the soft light, would move across the page with ease, tracing each letter and form. Occasionally, the scribe might consult other manuscripts, comparing texts or referencing annotations. These texts, often chained to desks or stored carefully on shelves, were arranged according to size, content, or patron preference. Leather bindings, sometimes decorated with simple embossing, carried the scent of tanned hide and a faint hint of the tannins used in their preparation. Pulling a book from its shelf required care, ensuring the spine and pages were not strained, and the volume would rest gently on the table, awaiting the scribe's quiet study. In these hours, the soundscape remained subdued, the scratch of quill, the faint shuffle of papers, the occasional soft wind through the open window. As the afternoon waned, the light gradually softened, shifting through pale gold and muted amber. The scribe often took this time to review work completed, observing lines and letters for consistency and clarity. Mistakes, when found, were corrected with gentle scraping of the parchment using a small knife, followed by careful smoothing. This process was slow and meticulous, the intent always to preserve the integrity of the material. Corrections were rarely hurried. The scribe allowed the parchment to rest briefly before returning to the task, ensuring the surface remained even and receptive to ink. In some cases, particularly on illuminated pages, a subtle layer of gesso, a mixture of chalk and glue, was applied to areas intended for gold leaf or additional decoration. The gesso required time to dry and set, adding another layer of measured pacing to the day's activities. Evening approached, bringing a gentle cooling of the scriptorium. The hearth was replenished with small logs, producing a quiet, steady warmth and a muted, smoky scent that mingled with the parchment and ink. The scribe would sometimes take a moment to observe the setting sun through the windows, noting the changing colors and the shadows stretching across the room. Candles were lit in small holders, their flickering light casting soft shadows over the text and surfaces. The flame provided sufficient illumination without disturbing the calm ambience, and the scribe often allowed the gentle glow to create a sense of enclosure and focus. In this way, the transition from natural to candlelight was a deliberate and unhurried part of the daily rhythm, signaling the approach of the final hours of work. During the early evening, attention turned to the organization and preservation of completed manuscripts. Each finished scroll or codex was carefully rolled or bound, tied with soft cords or placed in protective covers. The scribe might label the work with subtle notes, indicating the date, patron, or content. Shelves, cubbies, or chests were arranged to store these works safely, away from drafts or excessive humidity. Occasionally, small weights were placed on top of stacks to prevent curling or warping of the parchment. This careful attention to storage ensured that the manuscripts would remain intact and legible for many years, allowing future readers to experience the same quiet beauty and care that had gone into their creation. In some scriptoriums, evening was also a time for communal reflection or quiet reading. Scribes might share passages of scripture, poetry, or scholarly works in hushed tones, the sound of voices blending softly with the ambient rustle of parchment. These readings were slow, measured, and contemplative, allowing both the words and the act of speaking to be savored. It was common that one might trace the lines with a finger, feeling the subtle ridges left by the quill, or simply observe the intricate decoration of letters and borders, noticing the patterns and textures with quiet appreciation. The practice of reading aloud, though gentle, reinforced the tactile and visual experience of the manuscript, deepening the sense of connection to the work. As the day drew to a close, the scribe performed final tasks to prepare for the night. Tools were cleaned, quills rinsed and stored, ink pots carefully sealed. Brushes were washed and laid to dry, and the table was cleared of scraps, leaving only the gentle glow of candlelight and the ordered manuscripts resting quietly. The scribe might take a last walk through the scriptorium, noting the stillness of the room, the faint settling sounds of wood and stone, and the coolness of the evening air entering through open shutters. This slow inspection was a final act of care, a way to honor the day's labor and ensure the workspace remained in readiness for the following morning. By this time, the sky outside had deepened into soft shades of blue and gray, and the first stars became visible through the small windows. The room settled into a quiet rhythm of shadow and light, the gentle warmth of the hearth and the subtle fragrance of parchment creating a sense of calm enclosure. The scribe, having completed the day's tasks, could rest, the body relaxed and the mind soothed by the measured, repetitive motions that had filled the hours. The manuscripts, prepared with care, lay in their places, ready to be touched again by the hand of the scribe or the eyes of another gentle reader. In this way, the daily cycle of the medieval scribe was observed, a slow, deliberate movement from preparation, through writing and illumination, to the final care of manuscripts. Each action, though simple and repetitive, was imbued with attention and intention, creating a world in which time flowed gently, and the senses were attuned to texture, sound, and light. The quiet rituals of the day left a lingering calm, a sense of order and peace that carried beyond the scriptorium, into the stillness of evening and the gentle embrace of night. The afternoon sun shifted slowly across the high, narrow windows of the scriptorium, casting long, soft patterns of light across the wooden floor. The air was quiet, warmed by the gentle radiance of the day, carrying a faint scent of polished wood, ink, and parchment. The scribe continued in his work, seated at a simple oak desk, its surface worn smooth by years of careful use. He adjusted his posture slightly, leaning over the parchment, the quill poised delicately between thumb and forefinger. The hand that held it moved with quiet deliberation, guided by years of habit, each letter forming with a careful precision that had become almost automatic. In this time of the day, the scribe worked steadily, repeating the familiar rhythm of writing, dipping the quill into ink, letting it settle for a moment, and then gliding it across the cream-colored surface of vellum. The ink was made from oak galls, carefully ground and mixed with iron salts, producing a deep, rich black that held its color over time. The scribe's fingers occasionally brushed against the slight grain of the parchment, feeling its texture, slightly rough to the touch but resilient under the quill's pressure. Sometimes a faint scratch of the quill's tip could be heard, a soft, steady whisper in the otherwise hushed room. Around the scribe, the scriptorium contained other desks, each occupied by hands moving with similar care. The room smelled faintly of beeswax candles, which had been lit earlier in the morning to supplement the light from the windows, and of the faint dustiness of parchment. The walls, made of thick stone, held a slight chill, balanced by the warmth of the sun and the occasional breath of air from the open shutters. In this serene environment, time seemed to stretch, measured not by hours but by the progression of the scribe's careful strokes and the gentle turning of pages. At intervals, the scribe paused to examine his work, lifting the parchment slightly and tilting it to catch the light, inspecting the letters for evenness, spacing, and alignment. If a mistake was found, it was corrected with the calm precision required by the tools at hand. A scraping knife, a narrow, flat instrument, allowed the removal of small imperfections in the ink. The scribe would hold it at a shallow angle, scraping gently along the surface until the mark had disappeared. Afterwards, the parchment might be lightly rubbed with a piece of pumice, restoring its smoothness. Each correction was done quietly, the sounds soft and unintrusive, a gentle accompaniment to the broader rhythm of writing. Occasionally, the scribe would reach for another piece of parchment, measuring it carefully against the desk surface to ensure it was square and even. Medieval parchment was not perfectly uniform, so each sheet required attention. The thickness of each sheet varied, sometimes slightly more than 1 millimeter, sometimes a fraction less, depending on the preparation of the animal skin from which it had been made. The scribe's fingers traced the edges, feeling the slight variations, appreciating the subtle differences that gave each sheet its own character. Once measured and aligned, the parchment would be set in place, secured by a small weight or the gentle pressure of the scribe's hand, ready to receive the next careful strokes of ink. By mid-afternoon, a faint warmth filled the scriptorium, softening the stone walls and the wooden furniture. The light shifted slowly, revealing the texture of the beams and rafters overhead, darkened with age. The scribe's quill moved with a meditative regularity, each letter forming slowly, almost deliberately. The letters themselves were created with care, often following a specific style or hand. Gothic minuscule, for instance, featured narrow, upright letters, each with a gentle angularity, while Carolingian minuscule was rounder and more open. The scribe selected the style according to the manuscript's intended purpose, considering readability, aesthetic appeal, and tradition. In the quiet of the scriptorium, one could hear the occasional scratch of quill on parchment, the soft rustle as the scribe turned a page, and the muted sound of breath, steady and even. There were no distractions here, no interruptions or haste. The scribe's work demanded patience and presence, and the environment supported both. The light shifted subtly across the room, illuminating a faint collection of small tools and implements near the desk. A sand shaker used for drying ink, a small pot of colored pigments, a ruler with a gentle curve from repeated use, and a few sheets of practice parchment. Each item was carefully positioned, arranged according to necessity and habit, and each was used with a quiet, deliberate rhythm. In addition to the main body of the manuscript, marginal decorations were sometimes added, simple embellishments in soft red or blue. These were not intended to dazzle but to gently guide the eye and create a sense of harmony across the page. The scribe mixed pigments carefully, grinding minerals into fine powders and combining them with egg whites or gum arabic to create a paint of subtle richness. The colors were muted yet lasting, designed to complement the text and preserve the serene atmosphere of the page. The application of these colors was slow and methodical, each stroke measured, each hue considered in relation to the surrounding space. As the afternoon deepened into early evening, the sun's angle shifted, and a cooler light entered through the windows, carrying with it a faint hint of evening air. The scribe adjusted the candles, lighting a few additional wicks to maintain a steady glow. The warmth of the candle flames added to the calm, gentle atmosphere, their soft flicker creating slow-moving shadows across the pages and tools. The scribe continued in his quiet work, dipping the quill, gliding across the vellum, and examining the work with attentive eyes. The day's rhythm was unhurried, measured not by clocks but by the steady, repetitive patterns of ink, parchment, and careful observation. Sometimes, the scribe would pause to inspect his work from a slightly greater distance, holding the manuscript a few inches from the face. The letters, even from this distance, revealed their uniformity and care, a quiet testament to hours of focus. The surrounding pages, stacked carefully nearby, awaited similar attention, each sheet a canvas for the scribe's deliberate hand. When a page was complete, it might be set aside on a wooden rack, tilted slightly to allow air to circulate, ensuring that the ink dried evenly and thoroughly. Evening in the scriptorium was marked by a gentle stillness. The sun lowered further, and the air cooled slightly, carrying a faint scent of the nearby courtyard or garden. Sounds from outside were muted, distant. The soft cooing of birds settling in for the night, the rustle of leaves, the gentle murmur of water from a well or fountain. Inside, the scribe's movements became even slower, more careful, as if responding to the natural quiet that enveloped the room. Every action, from dipping the quill to turning a page, was deliberate, creating a rhythm that was almost meditative. By the later hours of the evening, the scribe's work shifted toward completion. Final touches were added to letters and margins, minor imperfections smoothed away. The parchment, once dry, was examined for texture and consistency. A final sweep of the hand over the pages could reveal subtle bumps or irregularities, prompting gentle correction. In this way, the manuscript grew toward its finished state, each page a careful record of time, skill, and attention. The process was methodical, predictable, and deeply soothing, reinforcing the scribe's connection to the material and to the day's rhythm. The scribe then prepared to gather the day's work. Completed pages were stacked carefully, aligned by size and orientation, often tied gently with strips of soft cloth or leather to keep them together. Tools were set aside, cleaned of ink and pigment, quills rinsed and stored for future use. The sand for drying ink was returned to its container, and brushes and pens were arranged neatly in their designated spots. Everything was restored to order, the desk once again prepared for the next day's work. The quiet routine of tidying and organizing was itself a calm practice, a gentle closing of the day's chapter. Candles were extinguished one by one, leaving the scriptorium in soft darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of the remaining embers of daylight. The air was cool, carrying the lingering scent of parchment and ink, and the gentle traces of wax from the burned candles. The scribe, standing slowly, allowed a stretch and a slight adjustment of posture after hours of careful, seated work. Each movement was measured, gentle, and deliberate. The quiet of the room enveloped him, a final companion to the rhythmic work of the day. The soft shadows played across the walls, and the space seemed to exhale, settling into a restful, even, slow state. The scribe's final tasks included noting the position of each manuscript and page for easy continuation the next morning. Simple wooden boards might be placed over partially completed manuscripts to protect them, and weights gently repositioned to prevent curling or warping of the parchment. The quills, carefully cleaned, rested in a small pot or on a ledge, their tips slightly angled, preserving their shape. Ink pots were covered, sealing the rich, dark liquid until needed again. Pigments and paints, now dry, were returned to boxes or jars, labeled and stored with the softest touch. The quiet ritual of preparation and arrangement extended the calmness of the day, bridging the act of creation and the restful hours of evening. The scribe finally walked to a nearby window, the cool stone beneath the feet grounding the senses. The fading light revealed a courtyard blanketed in gentle shadow, with the tops of trees swaying softly in a faint evening breeze. The air was still, carrying the faint scents of grass, soil, and the remnants of the day's warmth. Birds had mostly quieted, and the distant sounds of the village had diminished into a muted background. The scribe lingered briefly, appreciating the slow transition from day to night, the gentle dimming of colors, and the calm atmosphere that invited rest. Returning to the desk, a final sweep of the room ensured that everything was in place. Parchment stacked, tools arranged, ink covered, and brushes stored. The scriptorium was now quiet, ordered, and serene, ready for the next day, prepared with the same care and attention that had guided every action. The scribe turned slowly away from the desk, acknowledging the completeness of the day's work, the continuity of daily practice, and the quiet satisfaction of having participated in a timeless craft. As night settled, the room became cooler still, and the scribe left for the evening quarters. The journey through the corridors and stone passages was slow, echoing gently with each step. The sound was soft, measured, a calm rhythm accompanying the transition from the working space to the space of rest. Candles flickered faintly along the walls, casting a warm glow, and the scribe passed through in a gentle, unhurried manner. At last, the scribe reached the small chamber prepared for sleep. Straw and wool formed a simple, comfortable bed, layered with care to provide gentle support and warmth. The chill of the stone walls was softened by the textiles, and a final blanket or coverlet was adjusted to create a cozy, enclosed space. The scribe lay down, allowing the day's motions and rhythms to settle into a restful quiet. The faint scent of straw, wool, and lingering parchment filled the air, a comforting reminder of the day's work and environment. Eyes closed, breath slow and even, the scribe rested in the gentle embrace of the night, the quiet rituals of the day giving way to the serene stillness of sleep. And so, the scriptorium remained silent through the night, its desks and tools resting under the soft darkness, the parchment stacks awaiting another day of careful attention. The waxed candles, now extinguished, left a faint trace of their warmth, and the stone walls held the memory of the day's labor. Outside, the moon rose gently over the village, illuminating the quiet courtyards and narrow streets with soft silver light. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a delicate sense of calm across the surroundings. Everything was still, balanced, and peaceful, as if the world itself had adopted the gentle rhythm of the scribe's day. Time passed slowly, measured by the rising and setting of the sun, the quiet cycles of work and rest. In this medieval world, life moved with a deliberate, unhurried pace. Each day mirrored the last, each action guided by careful practice and gentle attention. The scribe's work, the preparation of ink, parchment, and quill, and the meticulous shaping of letters all contributed to a rhythm of calm, sustained focus. The quiet beauty of these rituals persisted, unchanging yet alive, a meditation in daily form. And through it all, the gentle, persistent patterns of light, air, and movement created a sense of continuity, a soothing, enduring presence that carried from the morning's first light to the evening's restful darkness. The quiet rituals of the scribe were not only work but a gentle harmony with the natural flow of time. The sound of quills, the texture of parchment, the warmth of candles, and the soft illumination of sunlight all combined to create an environment of calm observation and methodical care. Each element, from the smallest inkpot to the largest manuscript, played a part in this deliberate rhythm. The scribe's day, measured by these small, careful actions, exemplified patience and attention, creating a space of quiet learning, reflection, and slow, enduring satisfaction. The parchment, once blank, now carried the careful imprint of letters, lines, and subtle decorations. Each sheet, finished and drying, held the memory of hours spent in quiet diligence. The ink, carefully prepared from natural ingredients, maintained its deep black color, absorbing into the vellum with a slow, steady permanence. Colors, mixed with minerals and binders, glowed softly, accenting letters and margins without overwhelming the text. Every page was a small testament to time, technique, and the quiet devotion of the scribe's hand. And as night deepened, all of it rested, orderly and complete, ready for the new day and the continuation of the same peaceful cycle. In this way, the daily life of a medieval scribe unfolded, not in haste or urgency, but in a steady, gentle flow. Each morning began with preparation and ritual, each day proceeded through calm, attentive work, and each evening concluded with careful order and reflection. The scriptorium, the manuscripts, and the quiet rhythms of labor and rest were intertwined, creating a serene, predictable pattern that brought a slow satisfaction to both the scribe and the space he occupied. The repetition of simple actions, the soft sounds of quills and parchment, and the gentle observation of the day's light and air cultivated a peaceful, enduring sense of calm. And so, night after night, the scribe rested in his simple bed, surrounded by the quiet echoes of his own work. The parchment remained on racks and desks, the tools in their proper places, and the scriptorium maintained its serene order. Outside, the village slept under the soft glow of the moon, and the air carried the faint sounds of nature settling into darkness. Inside, the memory of careful hands, ink, and slow, deliberate letters filled the space, a gentle testament to the quiet, meditative practices of a life devoted to slow, attentive creation. The scribe's sleep was deep and unhurried, accompanied by the lingering calm of a day spent in harmony with the materials, the tools, and the gentle rhythms of the world. As the night wore on, the stone walls absorbed and softened the sounds of distant wind and occasional footfalls, the scriptorium resting in the same measured calm that had guided the day. The scribe lay still, his breath even, the mind settling into the quiet patterns of memory and routine. The tools, the ink, the parchment, and the carefully written pages all rested in anticipation of the new day, a new continuation of the slow, deliberate work. Each day, each movement, and each action was part of a gentle, predictable cycle, unfolding without urgency, without disruption, and without tension. And in this enduring rhythm, the scribe and the scriptorium existed in perfect calm, a place of quiet attention, soft light, and the serene passage of time. The final hours of night were marked by stillness. The manuscripts lay in neat stacks, awaiting inspection and further work in the morning light. Inkpots and pigment jars, sealed and resting, carried the faint scents of oak galls, minerals, and the subtle sweetness of binders. Quills rested, carefully shaped, ready for their next dipping, their delicate tips preserved by gentle placement. Candles, now completely spent, left faint wax traces along wooden surfaces, their smell a soft memory of illumination and warmth. The scriptorium, quiet and ordered, remained a calm sanctuary, a space shaped by meticulous, repetitive care. Through the soft darkness, the scribe slept, resting in alignment with the natural rhythm of day and night, guided by the careful, predictable patterns that defined the life of a medieval scribe. Each day's work, each letter written, and each page completed was a meditation, a gentle repetition of practice that filled the hours with calm and purpose. And in this quiet, unhurried world, the scribe's life continued, a steady, rhythmic flow of morning preparation, afternoon diligence, and evening reflection, all leading inevitably into the serene embrace of night and the promise of rest. The night deepened further, and the world outside remained calm. A faint wind passed over rooftops, rustling leaves gently, while the stars began to appear, scattered across the dark velvet sky. The scribe, undisturbed, continued in a deep, even sleep, the quiet rituals of the day lingering in memory, a soft echo in the mind. Each breath, slow and measured, was in harmony with the gentle pulse of the night. The scriptorium itself seemed to exhale, resting under the silent watch of the moon and stars. The air was cool, carrying the soft scent of ink and parchment, subtly intermingled with the earthy smell of stone and wood. All was ordered, balanced, and still. And as the night progressed, the scribe remained in a tranquil, untroubled rest, enveloped by the quiet, methodical rhythm of his work and the calm, predictable flow of daily life. Outside, the natural world maintained its gentle pattern of quiet sounds, the soft stirring of leaves, the distant cooing of birds preparing for dawn, and the faint murmur of water flowing slowly in channels or wells. The scriptorium remained a sanctuary of calm, its tools and manuscripts arranged with careful attention, each object in its place, each material at rest, ready for the gentle continuation of the same unhurried practices that had filled the day. In this enduring cycle, the quiet life of the medieval scribe unfolded, a life of repetition, care, and calm observation. The world moved slowly, deliberately, without rush or tension, and the scribe's actions mirrored this natural tempo. The soft light of candles, the texture of parchment, the careful preparation of ink, and the measured movement of quill across vellum all contributed to a serene environment. Each day's rituals, performed with patience and consistency, carried a gentle satisfaction that extended into the night, creating a lasting sense of peace and quiet contentment. And so, the hours of darkness passed, measured not by clocks but by the slow, inevitable rhythm of night giving way to dawn. The manuscripts,